Yo, what is going on, guys? It is your boy Nick. We're back again with a brand new video today. We're going to be continuing my series in which I review every single Marvel Cinematic Universe film up to the release of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and today we're going to be reviewing the fourth film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as well as the fourth film in Phase 1, Thor. Thor was directed by Kenneth Branagh, I hope that's how you say it, I might be pronouncing that wrong, and has a huge cast. Instead of just listing all the cast members, I'm going to talk about the cast and their individual characters individually throughout this review, so let's just get right into it. First person I'm going to talk about is Chris Hemsworth as Thor. In my personal opinion, I do not think Marvel could have found a better actor to play Thor. This really was perfect casting in my humble opinion. I think that Chris Hemsworth just nails Thor in every aspect of the character. He's a character that you care a lot about, so whenever the emotional stuff happens, you really do feel for this guy, but he's also really fun to watch, and he's witty and he's funny, and he's got such interesting just characteristics about him that I feel like without Hemsworth we would have never gotten the Thor that we have today. So props to Marvel for doing perfect casting on Chris Hemsworth. Another perfect casting they did in this movie was Tom Hiddleston as Loki. If you look at the last 11 years that this movie's been out, I don't think anyone could think of better actors to play these two characters, especially Loki. I cannot picture another actor playing Loki at this point. Tom Hiddleston nails his character so well. He's kind of like Marvel's version of the Joker, if you kind of think about it, but a lot more complex. He's the god of mischief, and I think Tom Hiddleston just plays this mischievous character perfectly. They could not have picked a better actor to play these two characters, in my humble opinion. And even though I don't think Thor is the best Marvel movie, I think that Loki is without a doubt the best villain, at least within the first phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Later down the line, you can argue some better villains, but Phase 1, Loki was the best villain, hands down, in my opinion. Some of the other villains in the previous movies were fine, but Loki is the most memorable, and I think that he's just going to be a comic book villain to remember for generations to come. Anthony Hopkins is also terrific as Odin. I think he does a great job at playing the father of these two sons who very clearly have problems with each other, and he does such a great job at showing that he really does care for his sons, but he's sick and tired of the rivalry going on between them, and he just wishes that they could coexist as though they're both going to be, as though they're next in line to be the rulers of Asgard. So, and Anthony Hopkins, he's so, I guess, just sympathetic as a father. You really feel for him, and even though he might seem like an old fool, as Thor says in the movie, he's a very understandable father. So Anthony Hopkins just totally nailed this role. So props to Anthony Hopkins for giving a great performance as Odin. Idris Elba is also great as Heimdall. Unfortunately, we don't get to see him too much in this movie, but we do get to see him more later down the line. And down the later movies, you really start to see the payoff that Marvel did by hiring Idris Elba to play Heimdall. And I think, really, they could not have picked a better actor to play him later down the line, really. And this, if I'm not mistaken, was probably the movie that made Idris Elba the star that he is today. And I'm just glad that they picked him to play Heimdall. They didn't hire some other just okay actor, because down the line, this casting choice really paid off. The supporting cast is also great. Natalie Portman is great as Jane Foster, and Kat Dennings is great as Darcy Lewis. These two characters I find very interesting as side characters, or not side characters, supporting characters. And I thought that the chemistry between these two characters and Thor is funny, but it's also very serious in the sense that, these are people who are meeting a god for the first time. They don't know how to deal with it, and so you do get a lot of funny moments out of that, but they handle the conflict very well. And I think that the cast all has great chemistry and all just works together really well. I think this may be the most well-casted movie within Phase 1. The only other debatable one for me is maybe Iron Man and maybe Captain America as well, but Thor has a terrific cast. I'm glad that they cast the people that they did. I also do want to mention real quick, Clark Gregg as Phil Coulson is great in this movie. You do see him in some of the other previous Marvel movies, although his character is really kind of just a side character there. And he's a side character in this one too, but he felt like he played more of a role in this one. Him being an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. really meant something, and I think that this is probably the most interesting we've seen him in Marvel movies thus far. He later down the line ended up starring in Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And I think that these movies are just an interesting introduction to the character. And I think in Thor, we get a lot more out of him, so I'm glad that we got to see more of him in Thor. So even though Loki is the main villain in this movie, I do also want to talk about the Frost Giants for just a second. The Frost Giants aren't really the main villain, they're kind of just side villains that are there, but I think the Frost Giants are very cool to look at. I think the visuals and the makeup that they put on these guys looks top notch. I was watching this movie last night, and I was thinking to myself that this movie is 11 years old, and it still holds up very well in terms of its visuals. The visual effects for the Frost Giants look great, but also I think that the visuals for Asgard and the CGI still holds up so well. I can't believe that after 11 years, the CGI still holds up so well, because I feel like sometimes when you watch a movie and it's over 10 years old, you notice that some of the effects don't hold up still very well. Thor, in my opinion, is the exception. I think the vast majority of the visual and practical effects in this movie still hold up in the year 2022. And that's saying something. It shows you that the people who made this movie knew what they were doing. I also think that the costume designs are great, especially for the characters up in Asgard. I do kind of feel like by today's standards, they do look maybe a little bit flashy. However, I do think that for what they were going for, it looks great, and also it doesn't look like they were CGI'd very much. It seems like they were real costumes. It's kind of cool to see, considering that a lot of costumes today are kind of CGI'd, and I kind of just wish that they would look more realistic. So I'm glad that in this movie they used real costumes that look really good, because sometimes I just look at a costume in a superhero movie and it's like, yeah, I can tell you're CGI'd something on the screen. But I'm glad that this one, the costumes were physical costumes, that it actually, it looks great. I think that the costume design team did a fantastic job with this movie. I also really like the script of this movie. So it's a serious story in the sense of it's about Thor trying to learn his way in order to be the ruler of Asgard, and he has to learn his way by being sent to Earth. But we also get a lot of fun moments out of it. You get a lot of witty moments. There's some great jokes in it, and I feel like vast majority of the jokes hit in this movie. They land perfectly. It's kind of like the first Iron Man movie. It's a serious movie in the sense of you got real world conflicts going on, but there's also enough jokes into it that it doesn't feel like it's just drowned in its own seriousness. And I think that the first Thor movie, did a great job at doing that. I kind of felt like later down the line, Thor: The Dark World was a little bit too serious, and then there were more humorous in the later ones, but that's for another time. The action scenes in this movie also hold up really well. I was really surprised to see how well the action scenes still hold up 11 years later after its release. I remember going and seeing this movie in theaters when I was a kid and really enjoying it, and even still, as an adult in 2022, I still really enjoy the action scenes. I think they're very well choreographed. The shots in this movie look very nice for a lot of these action scenes. I think the CGI and the costume design for all of these scenes looks great. Like, the action sequences are fantastic in this movie. I think that this movie and Iron Man 1 have the best action sequences of Phase 1. Thor is also a great origin story. Look at some of the other origin stories. Iron Man was a great origin story, and The Incredible Hulk was a decent origin story, but was missing some elements. Thor, in my opinion, is one of the best origin stories that Marvel has to offer, and I think that it's not perfect, but it's nearly perfect, because I felt like every aspect of these characters, whether it's what happened with Thor and what happened with Loki, the motivations are all made clear, and I feel like that's why this is one of the better origin story movies that Marvel has to offer. And I think that the origin story also does a great job of making a god from another planet, the god of thunder, a relatable person. I felt for Thor, and I think that that's something that's really important if you're going to make a movie where the main character is a powerful being. You need to make the person relatable or understandable, and this movie does a great job at making Thor relatable. So props to Marvel for making a great origin story for the God of Thunder. I also feel like this movie has aged well compared to a lot of the other Phase 1 Marvel movies. Iron Man 1 has aged very well. The Incredible Hulk has aged okay, but there's some elements of it that haven't aged too well. Then Iron Man 2 is fine, but I don't think it's aged all too well. Thor, on the other hand, I think has aged very well for a Phase 1 movie. I think that the origin story still holds up. There's some aspects of it that don't hold up still well to this day. There's some aspects that you can tell would not probably be made in the same fashion today, but I think that for this time, and I think that these are the last 11 years movies been out, I think Thor holds up really well in the year 2022, and I think that for the most part it's going to hold up for years to come. And as fantastic as this movie is, there are still some flaws. I'm going to go over them right now. Even though Loki is a great villain, and he really is, my only kind of complaint with him is that we don't get to see him too much. So even though his backstory and his motives are made clear, I kind of just wanted to see more of Loki, because Tom Hiddleston does such a good job in this role, and it's fun and interesting to see him be this mischievous, god of mischief. That's what he is. And I love the action sequences and the conflicts between him and his family. I kind of just wish we would have seen a little bit more of that, because we don't see too much of it. However, I feel like they do make up for it later down the line with the stuff Marvel chose to do with Loki. Another kind of flaw of this movie is that we do have another supporting character within our group of Jane Foster and Darcy Lewis, and that's Stellan Skarsgård as Aaron Selvig. And he's fine. It's just that I kind of feel like he's the most forgettable of the three supporting characters within that group. He does keep the team, in check, and he tries to remind them about the seriousness of their issues, and he is right. It's just that he does feel a little bit, I wouldn't say out of place, but because this is a fun movie, idealistically he feels not like a buzzkill, but kind of just keeping them grounded makes sense. Just that the way he's portrayed, it makes him a little bit of a vanilla character, and he's not bad or anything. When I watch him, yeah, he's okay. It's just that he's kind of the most forgettable character in the movie, and he's kind of vanilla, so that's kind of one of my flaws I have with it. And another flaw that I had is that even though the visual effects still hold up really well, and I think that's definitely true, the CGI for the Destroyer was a bit iffy in parts. I feel like it doesn't hold up as well as it did back in 2011, but I still think the action sequences with the Destroyer are fantastic. It's just that there's a couple moments where I'm yeah, the CGI, I can tell it's a generated image on a screen, but for the most part it holds up okay. There's just a couple moments a bit iffy. Overall though, Thor is a great origin story, and I think it's one of the best movies in phase 1 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I think it's definitely worth checking out. It still holds up very well, and I love this movie. I'm going to give it an overall grade of an 8.7 out of 10, which may seem like a weird grade, but it's at that thing for me where it's not exactly an 8.5 and it's not a 9 either, but I feel like it's just a little bit more towards the 8.5, but slightly better, so I give it an 8.7. I'm going to give it an overall grade of an A-. It's the second best movie that we've discussed so far in the series. It's not as good as Iron Man 1 in my opinion, but it's definitely better than The Incredible Hulk and Iron Man 2, and I think that this is one that still holds up, and I definitely recommend checking it out if you have not seen it already.
This drink, I like it.
I know, it's great, right?
Another!
So that was my review for Thor. I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Make sure that you tune in just a few days to watch me review the next film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Captain America: The First Avenger. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure that you hit the like button, hit the subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you get notified about my latest videos. And also leave a comment down below telling me what you thought. And if you have any video ideas or any things you'd like to add on to this review, let me know down in the comments. And yeah, that's been it. Peace!